My name's Keegan. I'm 23 years old and I'm a trans man. I guess the trouble with me started when my mom was pregnant with me. She thought the entire time she was pregnant with me that I felt so much different than my older sister had that I had to be a boy, to the extent that there's only boy names picked out for me, only boy clothes. And when my mom gave birth to me, she argued with the doctor for about 10 minutes. He was trying to tell her, no, this is a healthy baby girl, and she was convinced that I was a boy. So for the first few weeks of my life, I didn't really have a name because I was supposed to be a boy. I grew up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, which is not a good place for GLBT kids or GLBT anybody. I just remember, always being made fun of, and I had never, ever, ever considered that I might be gay or trans or anything like that because it wasn't a possibility. It wasn't something that was supposed to be, and I didn't want it to be because I knew the consequences of it. So, I would get made fun of, and uh, everybody would know that I'm a dyke apparently. Or then it ended up being once I hit puberty and I was still acting and dressing like a boy. Um, you know, things like Janine's a effing freak, she's gonna get a sex change, and I was just a complete loner throughout school, and I hated it. And as much as I wanted to confide in my parents, I couldn't, because as soon as I hit puberty is when trouble started with them as well, because that was really when it became not okay to them for me to be kind of screwing with gender the way I was and not presenting as a typical young woman. And so I really felt alone and completely by myself and with no one to confide in, and really was not seeing the point in life, and was suicidal for most of my teenage years. And as soon as I started puberty and my chest started developing into a female chest, I started um, self-injuring my chest. Right around when I was 15 and 16, I discovered internet message boards, and I I ended up meeting this woman who was then 22 and 23 respectively. She lived in Southern California, and I still lived in Northern Michigan. Um, and she was questioning her sexuality, and I guess decided that a teenage girl was the right person to test that out on. And I was excited to have someone like that because she was an emotional support for me, and that's all I saw her as, and that's all I ever wanted from her. Um, but it got to the point where I think my teenage mind was so desperate for that acceptance and that love and that support that I would do anything to make sure that she was still in my life. And her, being an adult, knowing right from wrong, I guess refused to do the right thing. And so it ended up being that, um, well, I mean, even before I moved out there, she was, I know now, like masturbating on the phone with me, and sort of getting inappropriate in those ways. And I ended up moving out to live with her and her husband and her 8-year-old daughter. Um, and that was after some choice words exchanged between me and my parents, including, "We wish we never had you." So I moved out and I began living with them. Long, 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 long story short. Um, Within a week of being there, she was sleeping with me and was putting her hand down my pants. And I remember not wanting it at all and just wanting to go home. I remember saying to myself, I want to go home, I want to go home, I want to go home. But I'd cut all ties with my family, and she was the only support I had, and so I had to deal with it. So eventually, things got so intense there that I couldn't live there anymore, and I moved back in with my parents back in Michigan. And I lived as a lesbian at that point, and even the only reason I identified as a lesbian was because this woman in California had led me to believe that that's what I was, because that's the only thing I'd experienced. But it just never ever felt right. And I think the only reason I was doing it because I felt like I had to label myself somehow, and that was the only thing that made sense. And so I went back to Michigan and I lived that life for a while and was still like really stigmatized at work and made fun of and discriminated against, and I got fired and from jobs for no reason. And um, then I ended up getting accepted into the University of Minnesota, so I moved to Minneapolis where I am now. And a couple of months before I moved to Minneapolis, I realized I'm trans. I'm not gay, or I'm not a lesbian at least. Um, and so right when I moved to Minneapolis, I wanted to start fresh, and so I started living as Keagan. And it was actually, I can say now, coming out as what I really am and living as who I really am is, as hard as it was at first, is the best thing that's ever happened to me. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, and the scariest thing I've ever done, and sometimes the loneliest thing I've ever done, but it's the best thing I've ever done. Um, when I told my parents, which was about 6 months after I had actually came out to, I guess, myself, some choice words were exchanged. I remember again being told that they wish they'd never had me, and I was a freak and, the most disgusting thing they know. And it was difficult, and they refused to accept it, and they refused anything to do with it. Still call me my old name and old pronouns. And by the following year, which was Christmas of 2009, the Thanksgiving Christmas season of 2009 was a year after I came out to them. I'd been on hormones since January of 2009, and my mother still wasn't treating me with the way I'd like to be treated, and I finally said, if you can't treat me the way I deserve to be treated, then don't be in my life at all. And so I went that holiday season with no celebrations, no nothing with my family. Um, and that was really difficult. And it was after that point where really asserting myself with my family, and I guess sort of in some way saying, you matter enough to me that when things aren't good with us, it hurts and I can't deal with that. It started to get amazingly better, and my relationship now with my family is great. The only thing I wish is we could live closer. I actually just got off the phone with my mom, and I was frustrated about something, and I'm able to confide in my mom and express feelings to my mom and feel close to her for once in my entire life, because my entire life I was so afraid of expressing who I was that she wouldn't like it, and so I've just never felt closer to her. So coming out as trans, despite all of the difficulties, is the best thing that I've ever done. And I can't imagine not living life this way. And um, you will deal with things like loneliness and bullying and people perverting you for their own needs because you're this anomaly that they can't get somewhere else. You'll deal with all of that, and it sucks and it hurts and it's lonely, but you need to know that you're not the only one, and it does get better. And all you need to do is all of that time that other people spend hating and being mean and not being good people, spend that time that they're wasting, use it to better your own life and better yourself, and don't use it in a reactionary way. Don't use it for hate. Don't use it for anything like that, because if you use that time wisely, you'll come out on top, and those people will become irrelevant very, very soon. And if you do that, and if you choose to keep going on with a life that's true to who you are, you will find out that sooner rather than later the world will thank you for your presence, because it's definitely made better by queer people being in it. So it gets better.